Hello and welcome to The Week That Really Was with John McGurk and Sarah Ryan for this week ending the 7th of November 2025. This is the podcast where I, John McGurk, am, like Matt Cooper until a few days ago, joined by somebody who is smarter, more popular, and arguably better looking than I am. And we're going to talk about that this week. We're going to talk about the departure of Ivan Yates. We're going to talk about the government's sharp turn to the hard right in immigration, which has been continuing. We're going to talk about the election of Zohran Mamdani in New York. We're going to talk about the opinion polls. We might even take a look at the health service and what we're paying for as we head into another winter. But first of all, Sarah, how are you?
I'm fine. That was an interesting introduction.
Well, it's true. Well, I want your opinion because to my mind, I know you and I talked about this on the phone earlier on today, the whole Ivan Yates and Matt Cooper saga. Obviously, it's a very popular podcast. Almost as popular as this one, a little bit more popular, to be fair. And you know, Matt Cooper has decided that Ivan Yates is no longer going to be a part of it. Do you think that was the right decision?
No. I think it's a mistake. I think it's a mistake because I think Matt Cooper is the kind of steady Eddie on that podcast. It's a dynamic where he's the kind of, I'm not going to say woke, but he's this sort of establishment, steady kind of Eddie part of that podcast. And Ivan Yates is the one who is more inclined to say the kind of mad, funny stuff or whatever. And I also think, no disrespect to Matt, but I think Ivan Yates is a superior political pundit. He was in politics. He knows it better than Matt. And his analysis of things, I think, is better. I think I think Ivan was the draw for a lot of people on that podcast.
Well, that is true.
I think that that's a mistake. So whether or not it's a mistake to get rid of him and the reason behind are kind of two separate things. I think it's a mistake to get rid of him in general. And I think the reason behind, maybe if he'd admitted that he'd made a mistake and said, sorry, it might have been enough. But anyway, I think not alerting listeners to the fact that you're media training people that you are talking about is not on.
I mean, I see the point. And obviously we've had a similar issue on this podcast where last year you went off, didn't you? And you helped Niall Boylan in his election campaign. And we fully declared it on this podcast. We told people what you were doing and I slagged you off week after week about it. And then when we came time to interview Niall, you didn't take part in that. And we were fully transparent about what happened.
And also you didn't even ask me anything or you didn't tell me anything or obviously you just did that interview with Niall and that was it. But I think there's nothing wrong with that. You're just transparent about it. If I'd said nothing about that, was managing Niall's campaign and then was giving analysis week after week on the European elections without mentioning anything. I mean, look, it's not like the crime of the century or anything, but it's just a bit... people listen to the podcast expecting you to be giving your honest opinions. We would often say on this podcast that we're friends with people in Fianna Fáil. You know what I mean? But I'm not giving media training.
You're friends with people in Fianna Fáil.
Yeah, you're friends with people in Fine Gael. But, or we both have a couple of them. But the point is, I'm not giving, I'll just pick somebody, I'm not saying every week that Duncan Smith is a great TD while also giving him media training. It's just, no.
Yeah, look, I get it. I do get it. I do understand the crime that Ivan Yates committed, but I just can't take it seriously. I can't. It kind of feels to me like the erection of glass walls where they suit. I keep thinking of our old pal Hugh O'Connell, right? And Hugh O'Connell has done absolutely nothing wrong. He is the government press secretary. He is an advisor to Simon Harris. And up until not that long ago, he was a very senior political correspondent with the Irish Independent, and he jumped the fence. And I know it's not exactly the same thing, but what I'm saying is this entire industry, the political media complex, is incestuous. And I mean, Hugh O'Connell, I'm just picking him as a name people might know because he's far from being the only person in this position, where people float from one side of the fence to the other side of the fence all the time. We live in a country where Miriam O'Callaghan, who presents Primetime and has a book out, is the sister of the Justice Minister, Jim O'Callaghan. And she's the leading current affairs presenter on the national broadcaster, and he's the Justice Minister. Again, none of them have done anything wrong. Neither of them done anything wrong. They're entitled to their separate careers, but it wouldn't happen in a bigger country. Just wouldn't happen.
But she was in, hold
Um,
on, but like Miriam O'Callaghan, in fairness, was in media long before Jim O'Callaghan thought about being a TD. Her entire family aren't to abstain from political life just because she's on the telly. So you
I
just
know, I
have
just said,
so you
neither of
just
them
have
have done
to,
anything wrong.
yeah, you just have to sort of, it's not about the thing. It's about, I think I've said this on the podcast before. I was in politics, my dad is in politics, and people go on about dynasties in politics and how they're terrible. But nobody, and particularly people in sort of people before profit and stuff like that, nobody goes up to the people before profit TD while he's celebrating getting elected and says to his kids, "Oh my God, are you Devo? You can never be a TD now. That's that whole career option ruled out for you now." Like, people grow up in taxi, their dad's a taxi driver, they become a taxi driver, their dad's a lawyer, and so on and so on. So, there's nothing about that. It's about how you manage it. And Miriam O'Callaghan can't go on RTE every week and talk about what a great guy Jim O'Callaghan is and not mention that he's her brother. Do you know what I mean? You just stay away from it. And
True.
I think if Ivan Yates had said, "I do media training," no one who listened to that podcast would have cared.
Yeah, I still don't care. I mean, the thing that happened this week, as far as I'm concerned, is that the biggest hit Ivan Yates took was to his reputation as somebody who provided media training. Because I mean, like this array of Fianna Fáilers who are apparently crack trained by Ivan. I mean, it's not a great advertisement. If he was a football coach in the Premier League, he'd be sacked. I mean, he was responsible for putting that Jim Gavin those two debate performances out. He coached them ahead of them. And I mean, like, you would have sworn that Jim Gavin didn't receive any training at all watching those debates. Now, Ivan's defenders will say, you can only work with what's in front of you. That may be a fair comment, but like, as somebody who myself has done media training in the past, although I will stress, not since I've been editor of Gript, but I have done media training in the past for both political candidates and others and people who are in various lobby groups and what have you.
So
It's an important
I think we
business.
did some of it together, actually, but long before we ever had this podcast.
It's really not that hard to improve on the performance Jim Gavin put on in those debates. So I think Ivan has taken a reputational hit there. But then we come to Matt, because how do you handle this? Like, let's say it was you, and let's say you hadn't disclosed to me or to anyone else that you're working for Niall Boyle, and then it came out. I think what I would ask you to do is a full mea culpa on the podcast and say, "I'm sorry, I got that one wrong," and throw your face on the listeners and the viewers and the people who pay attention to us every week and say, I got this one wrong. I think what Mark Cooper has done is a catastrophic error, because, as you say, actually, you didn't say, but I'll say, nobody's listening to that podcast from Matt Cooper. And I say that it's like our old friend Joe Brolly and Dion Fanning. No one's listening to that for Dion Fanning. Very few people listen to this one for me, I sometimes think, but maybe we're a little bit more balanced than them. But it's a huge and catastrophic error. And, c'est la vie. But what do you make of the efforts to make this into this kind of political controversy between Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and suggest all sorts of dirty tricks going on, and that Ivan Yates is somehow part of that?
Aren't they? Like, really trying. Like, I saw Paul Murphy, I think, tweeting, like, "Oh my God, this is evidence of what?" Like, they're really trying to turn this into a big thing. I think he should have said something. He should declare it if he's media training people that he's talking about. Matt's made a huge mistake for the health and well-being of their podcast, getting rid of him. But, like, it's not the lone gunman on the grassy knoll, guys. Like, chill out. It's not that big of a deal.
There seems to be kind of an effort to suggest that Ivan Yates working for Fianna Fáil is connected to Ivan Yates saying the thing he said about Catherine Conley.
Bit of a stretch.
Which, like, your conspiracy theory there is that Fianna Fáil were in a conspiracy with Ivan Yates to nobble their own candidate, nobble the Fine Gael candidate, and elect Catherine Conley president. And Paul Murphy, of all people, is very annoyed about this. So it all seems to me to be just a little bit of a confection. I don't know. I will say this. I go ahead.
But I mean, I think that's why you declare it, because if you say, your media training one of them, then the context of what he was saying about smearing the bejesus out of him was having a conversation about political tactics, like we would have on this podcast all the time. And we might say, well, Micheál Martin should do this, or Jim O'Callaghan ought to do that, or whatever it might be. And the context he was saying was what they should do in the campaign. Okay, now it turns out he's media training Jim Gavin, but that's why you declare it, because it provides a background orientation to what you're saying. But I really don't think that he came up with this amazing, silver bullet shot for Catherine Connolly. Oh yeah, smear the bejesus out of her, took down her campaign. It, if anything, it damaged her, the Fine Gael campaign.
But I think that's the conspiracy theory.
Yeah, sorry,
that it
I
was
literally was thinking, I was literally realizing that as I was saying it. I still think, I don't think
it's the kind of comment
Machiavellian. Yeah.
It's the kind of throwaway comment that Ivan Yates has been making for years without consequence, and he finally made one that had consequences, and that's it. It's interesting. We often get slagged on this podcast. People get angry in the comments because I will say, James Lawless, the Fianna Fáil TD, who's a lovely fella, and people will say, why you say he's a lovely fella? It's not necessary.
They're
Well, part of the
evil.
reason I say that is to declare the interest that I know the guy, not well, but like that. I know him, spoken to him. I don't want people thinking I'm commenting on somebody because I like them or dislike them. I just try to be honest with my views. I mean, one of the things about this job is you have to be prepared to like somebody on a personal level and give them a good kicking every now and again, as supporters of Independent Ireland will know. Watching this podcast, I've a lot of time for a lot of people in that party, but I
Totally.
It's my job every now and again to give them a good kicking.
But also, you said last week something about Catherine Arda, and you said Catherine Arda, I'm sure she's a very nice person. And I said, well, she is a nice person because I've known Catherine Arda since I'm started being a member of Fianna Fáil as a teenager, and she is a nice person. And, you can still say Catherine Arda has this view on that and you might disagree with it, but we're just being honest that we know these people. But we're not.
You were in the
but
Daughters
I'm also,
of Fianna Fáil CD's club with Catherine Arda, weren't you?
Exactly.
Met every Tuesday.
And she, in an underground bunker. No, she is a very nice person. I've loads of time for Catherine personally, always have. So what? But I'm not giving Catherine Arda secret media training and then saying she's doing a great job, she's running for president, and slamming her opponent or whatever, and trying to act like I don't have skin in the game. That's the problem.
Well, I feel like we've talked about this a while now, but in fairness, I don't think there's any record of Ivan Yates saying, Jim Gavin is doing a great job, by the way. I don't think that's out there.
But
maybe
there is
wrong.
Evidence of him saying that James Brown was doing a great job when he was giving him media training, as I understand.
Yeah, true. All right, well, poor old Ivan. He'll be back, of course. You can't keep the likes of Ivan down. Literally, if he's in a radio studio, because he stands up. But he's, we'll see where it goes. But anyway, I think our chances of overtaking Path to Power in the listenership rankings have probably improved this week. Anyway, let's turn on to other matters. I actually wanted to get into this business about the health service and tax. And I'll tell you why. It is because this week I had a text message from a dear friend who is regularly in the hospital. One of those people who just unfortunately has a chronic illness and is regularly in the hospital, who was told on Thursday that in the entire city of Dublin, amongst public beds and private beds, there is not one spare bed anywhere in the system. We're spending 27 billion, Sarah, on the health service this year. 27 billion, that's what we're spending. And yet we have, I think there are 15,000 hospital beds in Ireland available, which works out at about £1 million a hospital bed per year. And in 1987, which is now 28 years ago, or is it 38 years ago? I think it's 38 years ago. We had 13,000 beds for a population of 3.5 million. So I guess my question is, how on earth can any of this be justified?
Well, it isn't. I mean, we have a abysmal health service. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this beds thing has been going on for years, and I always have this distinct memory of, actually it was written about on Gript when I got this throat infection called Quincy years ago, and I ended up going to Beaumont Hospital. And the very short version of this is that it's an emergency and they lance open your throat with a blade, and then they give you a bucket, and then they said to me, you'll get a bed. And I said, okay. And then they put me on this chair in front of a laundry closet, cupboard, whatever, where they were coming all the time to get sheets. So I'd have to stand up with my bucket of bleeding into, and they would need me to stand up every few minutes to get sheets out. And I waited for 18 hours for this bed. And eventually they said, oh yeah, it was kind of like the claw, in Toy Story. Everyone's sitting around for hours and hours and hours. And then every once in a while, someone's name will get mentioned. And it's like heaven has just come down and taken you. And you're going to be brought up the stairs to the, lofty heights of a bed. And then I went upstairs. And what I got to was a larger room with more chairs. And at the time, I was very confident that that second room wasn't counted as people waiting on trolleys, if you know what I mean, because you're still on chairs. You're technically not waiting on a trolley. So I think all these numbers are kind of massaged in the right way, not even real. You know what I mean? I just have no faith anymore. I'm not going to get into it now because it's still in happening or whatever in real time, but and that people who listen will know that I was talking about my back a while ago. And even though I have private health insurance, I think you would agree, and I will tell the full story of this at some point, but negligently misdiagnosed, would you say by private health insurers? And I'm now dealing with the consequences of that. And waiting, and I presented to A&E in the Matter Public at one point, because a lot of private hospitals close their A&E at 7:00 at night, or they don't have this specialism, or they don't have that specialism. It's all this kind of, you don't realize that. You think health insurance is amazing, and then you realize that if you have a throat infection, there's no ENT person in this hospital or that person, so you have to go public. Or you have a problem with this, no, we don't do that. This clinic, the A&E and the Matter Private closes at 7. Other ones are closed at 6, this kind of stuff. So you go, I explained it at the time, you go to A&E, you wait 14 hours, chicken wings and people carrying on, fighting. It's just a hellscape. It's a hellscape. And I'm convinced that people die at home to avoid it. So I don't know what we're getting in terms of value for money. But it is, we're paying, first world taxes on our health service and getting a third world health service.
Some of the figures are extraordinary. So the HSE, the Health Service Executive, employs, do you know how many who employs?
Oh, like hundreds of thousands.
No, it's not hundreds. It's close to 200,000. So it directly employs 160,000 people. And then the additional, there's Sarah's dog barking in the background. Then additionally, it employs about another 40,000 on contracts. And that makes it by far and away the largest employer in the state. The working age population of the country is about 3.6 million, which means roughly 1 in every 20 people in the country who's working works for the health service. Which is extraordinary if you think about it. 1 in every 20 people working. So for 19 of us, there's one person working in the health service. And obviously, we hope that 19 of us all won't be sick at the same time. Yet in all, spending has more than doubled over the last 10 years. The number of beds has barely increased at all. It's barely increased at all, as I said, in about 30 years. Waiting lists are through the roof. We know the story with children with scoliosis. And we know the indignities suffered every week by people, often elderly people, often people who've worked hard and paid taxes all their life, who are left lying on trolleys in hospital corridors up and down the length of the country, with nurses harried and harassed and frantically considering, who to get to next of the 12 people lying on a trolley, moaning and groaning in a hospital that doesn't have beds. Now, I set that against the context of the tax situation, because I was looking at this today. If you earn over 70,000 euro in Ireland, now 70,000 euro is a good income. Don't get me wrong. It's a good income. A lot of people would be very happy to earn it, but it's not that far above the national average. And on every extra euro you earn after you hit 70,000, you are paying 40% of it in income tax, 4.1% of it in PRSI, so that's 44.1, and then 8% in universal social charge. So every extra euro you're paying 52% tax. Of the euro you get to keep, of the 48 cents you get to keep, everything you buy with that, you pay 23% more tax in terms of that. When you go to fill your car with diesel, you spend basically 60% of every litre goes directly to the government. You're taxed on your credit cards. You're taxed on your home. You're taxed on your car insurance with the insurance levy. You are taxed on your television. You're taxed on your bloody dog. And for all of that, we have this behemoth of a health system that, the wealthiest people in the country were told pay the most. So these are the people in trouble who are paying all this money. And then when they actually need that health system, public or private, there's nothing there. And I suppose my question is, why the feck do we put up with it?
Yeah, I know.
It's a mystery to me. It's an absolute mystery to me, and I think that the answer to it is this kind of fatalism of we can't do any better. And the other thing is, I think the sheer size of the HSE makes it unreformable because it's employing 160,000 people. So it's now an immensely powerful unionized structure. These people are all in trades unions. So the government tries to reform it or fix anything or change working practices or improve it. You've got strikes. And so what we've had for the last 20 years is governments just trying to get around the problem by throwing ever more money into the big bonfire of cash and hoping that will solve the problem. And it hasn't worked. And you have people like my friend, who's a high earner. He's just suffers from a chronic illness and he's regularly in hospital with it. And he's left to suffer in immense indignity, like thousands of people who don't earn nearly as much as he does. Of all social classes up and down the country. It's just, to my mind, it's baffling that we put up with it.
I think it's though because I think there is a kind of a thing there. It's like childcare, people, like childcare is insane when you're in it. And then one day it's over and you kind of forget, you move on. And so people will say, and I've read many articles about this, kind of posters, people will be polled and they'll say, oh yeah, health service, not happy with the health service, but they don't vote on it until it's actually affecting their mother, their father, or them. And a lot of people, it doesn't affect them until, apart from the problem I have on my back and then I've had a throat infection, like I would never be in touchwood. I would never be in hospital. I would, it wouldn't impact me at all. I had children. I think that, to be fair, the process of having a baby in Ireland is much better than the health service overall. Whether you go private or you go public, there's the Domino scheme in Holles Street. I have a few friends who've gone, that's a midwife-led scheme, public scheme. All of my friends who've gone and had their babies in Holles Street in that scheme have sung its praises. So, but apart from having children, until you're an old person, you're probably not coming up, please God.
I'm starting to get worried of this. I'm starting to get worried of this. We're both in our early 40s. That's the age where, you start to become susceptible to ailments and you start to need the health service. Yeah, I fully agree with your diagnosis. When I was in my 20s, 30s, I didn't really give a crap because it wasn't my problem. Nothing to do with me. And I feel terrible about that, by the way, because I don't think I'm on my own in it. And then in recent years, I've seen obviously family members need access to it. I've had some up close and personal experiences with it through people I love, and it's been appalling. And I'm now worried. I'm at the age where things start to go wrong with you, and it's only going to get worse. So I suppose now I'm very selfishly starting to care a bit about the health service. But more than that, I'm just offended by the waste of money. I'm offended by the amount of money that's taken off hardworking people up and down the country in tax every week. And, people think they're paying for services. That's what they think. They think, oh, well, my taxes are going to pay for services. And they're not. They're not. They're in large places largely going to pay for what are effectively employment schemes to keep people in jobs. Of the 160,000 people in the healthcare system, how many of them are actually frontline nurses? How many of them are frontline doctors? You can, it's a fraction. It's a fraction. There is an army of people doing administrative work in the HSE who, no disrespect to them. I'm sure some of them are good people, but were I granted supreme power and authority in the morning, a lot of them would find themselves redundant.
And also, there is nurses and there is particularly junior doctors, but they're paid shite. So it's not like they're not a big bill. That's why they leave. That's why they go to Australia and America, because pay is shite, doesn't cover rent, particularly in major cities. And you work insane hours for no money.
Here's an idea. Have more junior doctors, pay them more, and have them do some of the administrative work. We managed a health service with only 2,000 fewer beds in 1987.
But I'll tell you one thing, John.
Vastly less money.
And also another thing that people don't like to say, but it's true, that a lot of those hospitals were run better when they were run by nuns.
Also true. Also true.
Sorry, not sorry, but it's true. I know people who are older than me who were nurses, and they say it all the time, that they were run like the place was a well-oiled machine when it was nuns running it. Sorry if that offends anybody's deeply held woke sensibilities, but it's true.
Well, we don't have any nuns anymore. I don't remember the last time I saw a nun in the wild in
Oh my
Ireland.
God,
I mean,
I
it's funny,
do.
I've been to
I
Eastern Europe a
do.
fair bit. Do you?
I do. It was
Was it recently?
it was 6 years ago, and it was outside. It was the most sort of unbelievably insane timing. I came out of Cafe and Zen in the daytime. They do lunch, they do daytime stuff, and I was meeting somebody.
That's what you were doing in Cafe and Sen. You're having lunch.
I was meeting somebody. I was meeting somebody and having a very contentious. I'll tell you more about this offline, but a very contentious argument with somebody, and he had been talking all about how he'd found God, and then we walked out of Cafe and Sen, and there was a nun standing there, and I was like, I have never seen a nun in the wild, and now in the middle of this situation, there was a nun standing outside Cafe and Sen. So.
Yeah. It's funny, I've been to Eastern Europe a good bit over the last couple of years, Poland, Czech Republic, places like that. And you do see a lot of nuns, and quite young nuns.
Yeah.
Which just brings home how much their kind have gone extinct here in Ireland. Apart from, I know there are some cloistered orders, and I'm sure I'll get an email in from somebody talking about the Little Sisters of the Poor, who I think the convent in Galway. And what have you. So I mean, I know there are some, but you just don't see many, is my point. But yes, I agree with you on that. All right, let's talk. Let's turn things back to sort of day-to-day politics. What do you make of the government's continuing efforts to turn Farage-esque and Trump-esque and hard right on the issue of immigration rhetorically?
I tweeted about this during the week, and I think the tweet just got thousands of likes. And basically the gist of what I said was, I know this should be good news, but it just makes me absolutely furious that people were called far right and racist and dismissed and talked about as if they were pond scum for saying what now Simon Harris is coming out and saying, as if it's just like common sense. And now you already see people following him along, agreeing with it, saying what he said, and they just move it along really quickly. Nothing to see here. Yeah, no, of course this is a problem we need to do something about. Cowards all. They didn't have the balls to say it a couple of years ago. They called people racist who marched in the North Inner City. Every time there's a protest, they focus on, of course, there's elements of those protests, like people who start fires. Don't do that. Don't do that, obviously. That's not smart. But they will just focus on that instead of ever focusing on the issue at hand, calling people racist, calling people names, shutting down the debate for years. And now all of a sudden, like, oh my God, like, I just woke up. It's maddening.
There's a couple of things here, because I think there's nuance to all of this. I mean, on the one hand, and I wrote about this, and indeed Laura Perrin wrote about this for Gript this week, because I think it was worth saying twice. It is important to take the win. If the objective of politics, if you're a campaigner, is to move people to your position, is to persuade people that you are correct and to adopt your political position.
But we didn't persuade him. But we didn't. Sorry to interrupt you, John. But we didn't persuade Simon Harris. He just pretends he's Rip Van fucking Winkle, and it shows up outside when 200,000 people spoiled their votes and goes, "Oh, what's going on here? Oh no, immigration is a problem." As if it just occurred to him. Nobody persuaded him. He just flip-flopped when it suited him politically. That's what's maddening.
People are going to love you for that. They're going to love you for that. But like, I think maybe the 200,000 spoiled votes had an impact.
Of course, the 200 spoiled votes. But I'm still allowed to call it out that people are cowards. And there is people in towns across Ireland and communities in Dublin, in the North Inner City and in Pearse Street and Ringsend and places like that, who were called racist and called names. And I have a really big problem with that. Is he going to apologise to the people he called racist? Is he going to apologise for... Is he going to say sorry to people? And by the way, people who've been telling him that there was a problem for years, is he going to come out next week and say, I got that wrong? Is he fuck? Oh, I just woke up. What's going on here? Bit of a problem with immigration. Oh, we'll look at that. We'll look at that. Yeah, we will. And Mihal as well. No, I'm not. Like, okay, you take your wins and all, but no one convinced them. They just changed their mind like overnight when it was politically convenient for them to do so. And I think that is cowardly. I want my politicians to say it when it's hard, not when it's easy. I want my politicians to say you can't be a woman when you're a man when it's hard, not when it's easy. I want them to say that there's too much immigration, there's a huge problem with immigration when it's hard, not when it's easy. That's what politics is about. Yeah, it's about moving people to your position, but it's also just about having the fucking courage to call it out in the moment. No, the weakness is just sickening.
Well, I mean, I don't disagree with you on anything you've said, and I will add to it. I was going to balance my remarks before you kind of cast me as the naive kind of like, oh, I'm so happy that
I wasn't casting you. I'm just having a rant because it just drives me insane that these people just act like they didn't have a different opinion. And I really, like, I know people from the inner city who went to those protests who were called racist, and I know they're not racist. You know, and it's not right. It's not right to call people racist when they're just concerned about their local community and then just rock up a couple of years later and act like, oh, Jesus. Like I said, Rip Van Winkle, like it's suddenly occurring to you. No, you don't get to do that.
Yes. Well said, Sarah. Now, what I was going to say is that the point here is, as people have watched Ben this week or maybe seen Ben's video on this, like this guy, Harris, he's like, the left are shutting down debate on immigration. And yet...
Oh my God.
Like, do you remember poor Verona Murphy? Do you remember Verona Murphy when she was running in that by-election down in Wexford? I think she was going to be the Fine Gael candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some criminal incident involving a migrant over in Galway. And it was around about the time your woman, Lisa Smith, came back from Syria as kind of like, and the state was alleging she was an ISIS agent. And Verona Murphy running for election, she later got kicked out of Fine Gael for this and she ran as independent and got elected. She said that the state wasn't doing enough to vet people coming into the country and that there was a fair chance some of the people coming from Syria in particular might have ISIS sympathies. And Simon Harris was one of a cabal of Fine Gael politicians, Leo Varadkar, who was still doing politics at the time, Simon Coveney and others. They said this was a disgraceful thing. They didn't like the way the country was going, the comments like that would be made, that the Fine Gael could not possibly endorse them. And not only did they shut down debate, but she was removed from the party for speculating that people coming from Syria, which was a war zone, which up until a few months before that had been engaged in civil war, which ISIS were fighting with one side. Verona Murphy, for simply suggesting people should be vetted, was essentially ejected from her own political party. Now, it didn't do her any harm. She's now the Count Corla.
But it also is proof. But it's also proof that they were full of shit when they were so offended by her. Because if they actually had any integrity or actually believed in any of that stuff at the time, they wouldn't have voted for Count Corla.
No, they wouldn't. No. I mean, these people have. I mean, this is the thing. But I think it's important to look at it. No, but these people have no moral compass whatsoever. None. And that's why I think it's important to realize that, they can and should be, used as tools as well as everything else. I mean, if you can move these people to your position, they will pursue it because all they care about is votes. I mean, literally all they care about is votes. And immigration proves that more than any other issue because, like, you turn around, you basically denounce Verona Murphy as an un-person, then you elect her to be Count Corla, and then a few months after you've elected her as Count Corla, you come out and basically say the left is shutting down debate on immigration. I mean, what does that say about your character or your principles as a human being? I mean, Simon Harris, we know, has switched his positions and principles on just about everything. The most famous example, obviously, being abortion. I mean, and he's a moral vacuum. And there's a great scene in Yes, Minister where Sir Humphrey says, Sir Humphrey is called a moral vacuum, and his underling says to him, well, can I be a moral vacuum someday too? And Humphrey says, well, with some luck. Well, Simon Harris has achieved total moral vacuum status. And that's what this U-turn shows. So I mean, but I think the point is, when you've got a moral vacuum who will just follow wherever the wind blows is, I mean, I think that the responsible thing to do is to encourage him in the right direction, because what happened immediately after he made those comments, of course, was that there was a full court press from the institutional left in the media and try and turn him back. Fintan O'Toole was thundering that it was misinformation and disinformation. Una Mullally was out there, going, full, this is a terrible drift towards the far right. Cathy Sheridan, horrified. All of them, plus the left, what they were trying to do was create a bit of blowback that would scare the new immigration skeptics in Fine Gael back into line. And that's the point of it. And I think the point is when people move in the right direction, there has to be a bit of encouragement. You don't have to give them a hug and say you're my best friend and all is forgiven, but you have to be willing to say, kudos, you've moved in the right direction, and we don't hate you quite as much as we did last week.
But there's two elements to it, John. You see, the thing is that you're entitled to move your position and move in the right direction, and everybody should be happy about that. But it's like Mihal and abortion and things like that. It's not just moving direction. It's not acknowledging that you're calling people names who had this opinion. Do you know what I mean? It's not just about great, wonderful. The penny has finally dropped. How many years later? Wonderful. Johnny come lately has finally figured it out. Good news.
Yeah, but
the point is, John. But the point is, are you going to apologise to the communities across Ireland that you said were disgraceful and racist and whatever else for the last number of years? Are you going? And the communities who, the likes of Mary Lou and people like that, were saying that they didn't have a veto and that they, all this stuff that's been going on. Are you suddenly, or now that you've suddenly changed your mind, are you going to say, and I actually would like to extend my apologies to the communities that I've been calling racist for the last couple of years because I've realised now they're right?
Well, no, they're not going to do that, obviously. Nor is, look, one esteemed member of the government was out this week saying, and I quote, that Ireland should not be an attractive place for migrants. That he thought we were too attractive. This is the same government that it's not the exact same configuration in government, but it's largely the same government that had Roderick O'Gorman send all those tweets telling people that if they came here, they get their own home and front door key. And that's less than 5 years ago. It was just after the 2020 election when he did that. Tweets in about 47 different languages. So, they have learned nothing and forgotten nothing and all the rest of it. But
and the only people they've made
them is the government.
The only people that they've made
Ireland, true believers on this.
The only people that they've made Ireland an unattractive place for is young Irish people.
Yes, there's another soundbite for you folks from the ever productive soundbite factory.
The Ivan of this podcast. Sing.
The Ivan of this podcast. There she is. All right. Well, we'll continue to follow the government's shift towards the hard right with some encouragement. Simon, if you're listening, I'm glad that there's two of us in it now. Two of us out there fighting.
Welcome to the dark side, Simon.
Yeah, welcome over here. The water is warm. Hop in. I'll let you know who we're discriminating against on Tuesday. It's normally decided at a far right meeting on Monday. Who do we hate this week? And you won't be the topic this week because we decided that you're great after all. So welcome aboard. Speaking of people who won't be attending our far right meeting on Monday, Zohran Mamdani, the new Lord Mayor. I don't think they use the Lord in America.
No,
they're very anti-regal over there, of New York City. What do you make of this fella?
He came out of nowhere. I understand from polling that I looked at very, very fleetingly was that only a matter of months ago he was on single digit polling, 8% or something. So there's that. He gave a speech about his aunt or grandmother being afraid to be on the subway after 9/11. I think he's come out of nowhere, and I'm quite shocked actually. I love New York, and if you take a fleeting look at some of the things he's got planned, they're completely unrealistic and seem completely insane. But he's gotten elected, John. So
yeah, but he's got, first of all, look, there's one eternal truth about our friends on the left, almost everywhere in the world except Ireland. Our friends on the left go gaga for a young, charismatic, handsome man. They've done it for years. Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, Barack Obama helps if they're brown. or black just helps because diversity makes it a bit more attractive. But in Europe, you've got your Emmanuel Macrons and so on. They love a kind of young, charismatic lefty who gives a good speech, and all the better if they're ethnically diverse. All the better. So he fit the bill. He tickled. I mean, the only place in the world that this isn't true is in Ireland, where the most popular way to be a lefty is to be a geriatric. But in America they go nuts for that. I think this guy is. I'm delighted he's won the election. I'm absolutely delighted because I think one of the problems that has happened in world politics over the last 30 years is that people haven't really experienced the left in power with fully economically left-wing ideas. So the left had basically been with Tony Blair and Bill Clinton. There was all this kind of like middle ground stuff where we won't do anything mad on the economy, but we'll do the pronouns and the rainbow stuff and all that kind of stuff, and that'll satisfy our left-wing instincts. Now, finally, we have, in a position of real responsibility in one of the world's great cities, we have a guy who thinks the government should be running grocery stores and plans to introduce government-run grocery stores that will compete with all the pre-existing grocery stores and undercut them on price. So at once trying to put all the existing businesses out of business while having the American city government run grocery stores. That's one of his major ideas. I think he should be given his head. I think Donald Trump should resist any instinct to try and frustrate him. I think he should say, there's your, raise your money from people of New York in taxes and implement your policies. The federal government won't stand in your way, and let's see how he gets on. And let's see where New York is in the next few years. I'm not a huge fan of New York. I'm a New York Jets fan, so I prefer New Jersey, which is the state that they actually represent, where MetLife Stadium is. But I think the people who vote for things deserve to get those things good and hard.
Okay.
And that's and I also think in Ireland, by the way, to expand this out and broaden it to home, like one of the reasons I'm not that upset by the Catherine Connolly victory, and one of the reasons why I think that the next thing that's going to happen in Ireland will happen naturally if you look at the political pendulum, because there is no right wing alternative government to vote into office. The only alternative to this government is the left bloc led by Sinn Féin, and I think we will have to watch over the course of the next decade or 15 years as those people are voted into power, and we'll have to get what the country voted for good and hard. That's the unfortunate reality. Just as the British people are finding out now with the Labour Party that they voted into government, and they're about to get it good and hard in the budget, where taxes are going to go, income taxes are going to go, corporate taxes are going up, social insurance is going up, and the economic growth is going down. So, yeah, I think we're overdue for a whole new generation of people to learn why it is that socialism has never worked anywhere it's ever been tried.
But do you not think that even if the things he does don't work, it'll still be presented by the media in a way? We have the reverse of that with Argentina, with Milei. Like, they'll always have a negative slant on what he does, even when it's working. And that whatever happens in New York will be presented to us in a way that how it's really actually good.
Well, I think a better example is not Milei, but Venezuela. So, I mean, obviously Venezuela's had a socialist government endorsed by Sinn Féin for the last, 25 years or whatever it was, since the Bolivarian Revolution. And that country
they have a chronic toilet paper shortage.
The country has been destroyed. Average incomes have collapsed. You can't get toilet paper. It's that country has been absolutely destroyed. But unfortunately, that people have the excuse over on the left that it's Western sanctions, right? So it's the big bad Americans have shut off trade with Venezuela. The European Union won't talk to them. That's the reason they're poor. The reason why Cuba is poor, and why one of the things I find hilarious are kind of European people going to Cuba and taking pictures of dilapidated buildings, going, oh, so quaint. And you're like, this is a country that doesn't have running toilets in many of its public buildings because its system of government is so bad. Oh, it's the big bad American blockade. Well, look, Donald Trump cannot blockade the city of New York. And what I think would be a catastrophic error for him to do will be to try and interfere or prevent this guy, who's won a clear mandate, got more than 50% of the vote. Don't try and stop him enacting his agenda. Let him enact his agenda. Contain it to New York, and let's see what happens. If best case scenario, the guy governs well and the city becomes a paradise and loads of people want to move there. Well, then, you'll have been wrong, Sarah. I'll have been wrong. We'll all have been wrong. And, let the milk and honey run in abundance in New York City. Worst case scenario, it really is all that bad. And Donald Trump will have something to run against, or his successor will have something to run against in 2028. So yeah, I think let's this is what democracy is about. Is about trying out whether ideas work. So let's see if they work.
We will see.
That's what I think. You wanted to talk about moving back to matters domestic. You wanted to talk about the opinion polls here in Ireland. We've had a few of them recently. And it brings us back to this vexed topic of the presidential election and its aftermath. What are you seeing?
So I think one is, one thing, but there's been a couple in a row, and of Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael going down, Sinn Féin inexplicably going up, and then the rest going to kind of independence and whatever. But what's interesting about the whole thing is the decline, really sharp decline in Micheál Martin's personal responsibility, personal rating. And I think that's directly a consequence of the whole Jim Gavin thing. And I think a lot of people in Fianna Fáil who would have been disenfranchised or very discontent with Micheál Martin's management of Fianna Fáil would have always been met with, yeah, but he's polling higher than the party. He's the most popular leader in Ireland. And now he's the third most popular leader in Ireland. That sharp decline puts him in a very vulnerable position. So I think the polls are interesting. The only problem is that Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael can go down and Sinn Féin can go up. But we know from the last election that that's the merry dance we were led on all the way up to the actual voting. And it's the point you just made, is that there's nobody else to vote for. So on the day, people grudgingly vote for Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael again if they don't want a Sinn Féin left government. So, maybe I'm annoyed about the fact that Simon Harris has just woken up and changed his entire opinion on immigration all of a sudden. But in an absence of a potential for a centre-right government, we have to, dance with the one what brung us, as they say, and hope that we can influence and the public mood can influence the dial both within Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in another direction.
Well, that will only work. This is the thing. This comes back to my previous discussion about immigration and popularity. Like, the only way that will work, if you want to systemically move Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael to the right, is if after this rightward shift on immigration rhetoric, the two parties go up in the polls. Because that's a political signal. That's a political signal that says to the government, you are moving in the correct direction. Okay? And if that doesn't happen, if they continue to slide, and, people don't tell opinion pollsters, even tactically, that they are on foot of this new disposition, they are moving in that direction, then it's not going to work. And all that's going to happen is that those two parties are going to lose whatever kind of left liberal support they have left, because they've gone a bit right-wingy on immigration, and they'll sink further, and then they'll panic and they'll run right back to where the votes are, because Sinn Féin and the left will say, well, look, we haven't taken this lurch to the far right, and our vote is actually going up, because that's where sensible people are rewarding us for being sensible and moderate on these topics. And that's how this, when you've got a country governed by moral vacuums who only care about votes, that's a much more persuasive argument than the one of kind of like, well, yeah, we are really angry with immigration. Now you're doing something about it. We're still angry about you, and we're still not voting for it. I understand the anger, but in terms of how political signaling works, I think that's an issue. Look, in terms of Micheál Martin's personal popularity, I mean, you and I have said it for so long now, and it's not our catchphrase, it's yours, but they have done nothing. They will do nothing. They're going to continue to do nothing. Although I was fascinated by, was it James O'Connor writing in the Sunday Independent last Sunday, talking about how his party needed to kind of like get back in touch with the public. You can't do that with the current leader. But yeah, the moment for getting rid of him has already passed, in my view, has it not?
Totally. I mean, I saw some comments from at least one Fianna Fáil TD saying that they were going to wait for the result of the inquiry into the process of nominating Jim Gavin. Why? Like, what's the point? What's that going to tell you? Everybody knows.
I mean,
here's the inquiry. it was a complete mess. It shouldn't have happened, and Micheál Martin is to blame. There you go.
But the other thing is, if they're waiting for an inquiry to tell them why the opinion polls have moved against Micheál Martin over this issue, they're waiting for Godot, because no inquiry is going to tell them. I can tell them why the opinion polls have moved against them over this issue, or moved against Micheál Martin over this issue. And that is because it's nothing to do with Jim Gavin. Jim Gavin is only the proximate cause. The reason that Micheál Martin was always, had a high personal opinion rating is because of this myth, and it is a myth, that has been abroad for years, which is that Micheál Martin, whatever else you think about him, is a serious politician, a competent figure, knows what he's doing, and a safe pair of hands. And it's not that the public are really angry about Jim Gavin. It's not that people are sitting there kind of going, God, I can't believe Micheál Martin nominated that Jim Gavin lad. It's that the act of nominating Jim Gavin revealed to a large section of the public that Micheál Martin is just as incompetent and just as unable to do the job, and just as susceptible to political clangers as all the rest of them. So it shattered his image for competence, on which his popularity was based, and that's the reason. And it doesn't really matter what your inquiry says about who rang who when. The bottom line is, this is his fiasco. He personally took ownership of it, and it has been the biggest political fiasco of his career. No?
Yeah, no, 100%. I think the public, I think you're right, but I think the public also felt robbed in that election for a variety of reasons, which have already gotten plenty of airtime on this podcast, but that ultimately the blame has fallen on Micheál. And I would say most of the blame is Micheál's, but not all of it. But I think that the public were very disappointed with the options that were put in front of them, and some of that is Micheál's fault, and he became the person to blame. Like, they're not blaming Simon Harris, they're blaming Micheál Martin. And Simon Harris delivered a candidate. Fine. Micheál didn't. Micheál made calls and told people in the party to vote for Jim Gavin, etc., etc. So I just think overall, the fact that they're doing nothing, the lack of response to it, the let's wait and see what a report says, is, just further disappointment. When are these guys going to get some testicular fortitude?
Yeah, just to say, by the way, on the blame for the presidential election, I think one of the reasons why Simon Harris is getting off is because he's had Murray McGuinness walk off the pitch, right? Through no fault of her own, through illness. But so, he's had to run a replacement candidate. So people aren't attaching as much blame to him, because it's kind of like if Liverpool lose 3-1 while having to play an under 17 player in goal, right? It's, there's a you've had to put out a replacement who isn't up to scratch. People kind of get it, I think. Even though I think arguably for the state of the presidential election in the round, Fine Gael have much more to blame. They were the ones who quite aggressively set out to narrow the choices available to people. But I just think the whole fiasco of the presidential election shattered the image of political competence, not only for Micheál Martin, but for the government as a whole. Because they've presided over this fiasco, which was wholly in their control, and it's resulted in the country electing Catherine Connolly with the most reluctant landslide victory in history, because most people stayed at home. A lot of people protested. She's gotten 64% of the valid votes cast. But that's basically because Sinn Féin supporters and supporters of the other left parties came out in the exact same numbers they came out in the last election, and no one else did. That's what's happened. So there we go.
But I think also, there's multiple elements to this. I was talking to somebody the other day about the mood of the party in general, and they were talking about an old kind of friend of theirs who used to be is dead now, but used to be a member of Fianna Fáil, who used to always say with pride back then that Fianna Fáil was a professionally run organisation, that it took its politics seriously, and it was a professional movement, if you want, and that's why it was so successful. And people like that, who feel that way about Fianna Fáil, must be cringing to their toes, because the level of professionalism in this whole thing was zero. Like, literally the most professional thing that happened in the whole thing was that they got Ivan to do some media training. And look how that went.
But how many active Fianna Fáil Cumann actually still exist? This is the kind of information that you don't get. But I think it's massively collapsed. I was talking to yet another person during the week who I know a little bit through the family. He would have been, a staunch Fianna Fáiler. He's in his late 60s now. He was a staunch Fianna Fáiler. I knew when he was in his 30s. And he was saying that the Cumann just doesn't have meetings anymore. That the Cumann is gone. No one young came in over the last 20 years. It's just gone. The Cumann still exists on paper. He's still the secretary or something. But there are no meetings. This organization that used to meet once a month, the Fianna Fáil grassroots, it still exists on paper, but as a force, it's gone. Am I wrong?
I mean, I don't know. I'm not a member, but I'm friends of people who are members, and I mean, there was Cumann meetings. They're the small cells, and then those Corla meetings, which are the larger constituency group. I mean, even in my day, there wasn't really Cumann meetings anymore. So I think there's just one large constituency meeting. And I think that, and I don't think this is exclusively a Fianna Fáil problem. I think this exists in Fine Gael. You used to have these numbers of people who would come out and they'd put up posters and they'd canvass and they do this and they do that. That was the party machine in that constituency. And there'd be, there'd be 50, 60 people out on a night during an election, a general election. And there'd be people who would put up posters, whatever. Now poster companies make a killing because it's so professionalised now, because nobody has the volunteers to put up their posters. Nobody.
Yeah. Yep. It's just not there. Well, Sinn Féin, maybe. Sinn Féin still have a relatively young and relatively activist organisation, and maybe some of the smaller left parties as well, who are big into their grassroots politics, to be fair. All right. Look, I think we'll leave it there for this week, unless is there anything else you wanted to add or tell listeners?
No.
I want to finish by reminding people that the Battle of Ideas, where you'll be able to see both Sarah and I, is on November 22nd. We have sold, I think, 75% of the tickets. There are a few still left. If you go to gript.ie, you'll see the thing for the Battle of Ideas. So I think we've sold over 300 tickets, and we are looking forward to seeing as many of you there as possible. That is, I think, 2 Saturdays from tomorrow, if you're watching this on Friday. So we'd really like to see you there. And apart from that, I guess it's been another week closer to Christmas. So have you got your shopping done yet, Sarah?
Don't be one of those people, John. Don't be one of those people. It's the beginning of
a couple of weeks now as the tree goes up.
Stop. We can just, we all know, dedicated listeners will know that I'm an early adopter on the tree. It'll be the end of November. But I'm not ready. I'm not mentally prepared to talk about Christmas yet. It was Halloween about 45 minutes ago.
Her Halloween costume, by the way, folks, was just great. If you missed
Viking.
it. All right. Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much as ever for listening to us. I've been John. She's been Sarah. This has been The Week That Really Was. We'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.